At 21, Susan Atkins would become the most visible member of a ragtag bunch of killers, the Manson family.
Susan Atkins was a member of the Manson family, convicted in the 1969 murders of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others.
I didn't have nothing to do with killing those people, period.
And I don't lie, so I know what I would say then.
I've told you that all the way down the line. I wasn't around anyone when they were killed.
And I certainly wouldn't tell nobody to go in and do nothing to anybody that I wouldn't want done to me.
I've spoken the truth as I've talked to you. And the truth is I never killed anybody. I lied at the grand jury. I lied at the trial and said that I killed people that I in fact did not. I live with that knowledge. I live with the fact that people think that I killed a pregnant woman, 8.5 months pregnant.
Susan Denise Atkins was an American convicted murderer and a member of Charles Manson's family, whose followers committed a series of 9 murders at 4 locations in California over a period of 5 weeks in the summer of 1969. She participated in several crimes, including the most notorious, the Tate murder. She showed neither remorse nor a willingness to accept responsibility for her part in the crime. Susan Denise Atkins was born on May 7, 1948, in San Gabriel, California. She was of English, Irish, Scottish, and German descent, the second of 3 children. She grew up in Northern California. According to Atkins, her parents, Jeanne and Edward John Atkins, were alcoholics, and she was sexually abused by a male relative. Until she was 13 years old, Atkins and her family lived in a middle-class home in the Cambrian Park area of San Jose, California. She was described by those who know her as a quiet, self-conscious girl who belonged to her school's musical club and the local church choir. When she was 15, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. 2 weeks before her mother was hospitalized for the final time, Susan arranged for members of the church choir to sing Christmas carols under her bedroom window. Her mother died of cancer in 1964 when she was almost 16 years old. After her mother's death, relatives were asked to help look after her and her 2 brothers. Over the next 3 years, Susan's life was disrupted by the gradual breakup of her family, frequent relocations, and her leaving home to live independently.
I didn't have what you would call an ideal upbringing. I'm the child of 2 alcoholic parents. I'm a victim of incest. My mother died when I was 14. I did not do good in school. I ran away when I was 18 and went to the city and tried.
When she left home, she got into drugs in doses that would send anyone crazy.
My brain was fried. I probably had over 350 LSD experiences, separate individual experiences, in less than a year and a half. I smoked marijuana on a daily basis.
Edward Atkins, her father, eventually moved to Los Baños, California, with Susan and her younger brother Stephen. When he found work on the San Luis Dam construction project, Edward left the 2 children behind to fend for themselves. Susan took a job during her junior years in school to support herself and Stephen. She had been an average student at Lee High School in San Jose, but her grades deteriorated when she entered Los Baños High School. After her declined grades, she decided to drop out of high school and moved to San Francisco. Out on her own, Susan fell in with 2 escapee convicts and participated in several robberies. When caught, Susan spent 3 months in jail and then returned to San Francisco. In early 1967, she worked as a stripper in Los Angeles. She had bounced from place to place and from job to job, living at a house with dope dealers. Later in 1967, Susan met Manson when he played guitar at that house. When the house was raided several weeks later by the police, Susan was left homeless. Manson invited her to join his group and introduced her to other women in his orbit, Lynette Fromey, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Mary Branner, who were embarking on a summer road trip in a converted school bus painted completely black. She was nicknamed Sadie Mae Glutz by Manson and a man who was creating a fake ID for her. Susan later claimed to have believed Manson was Jesus.
One guy come up and said, I heard you said you were Jesus. I said, no, man, I ain't said nothing. He said, I'm glad. He said, I'm damn glad. I said, why? He said, I know you ain't him. I said, how do you know? He said, because I am.
The growing Manson family settled at the Spahn Ranch in the San Fernando Valley. in Southern California, where on October 7, 1968, Susan bore a son by Bruce White. Manson helped deliver the baby and instructed Susan to name him Jesus Fragslatz. Susan's parental rights were terminated once she was convicted of the murder, and no one in her family would assume a responsibility for the child. Her son was adopted and renamed in 1969, and she had no further contact with him. While in prison, Susan got married twice. Her first marriage was to Donald Lee Lacer in 1981. Susan became Lacer's 36th wife, but the two divorced after he sought to marry yet again. Then Susan went to marry James W. Whitehouse, a graduate of Harvard Law School, in 1987. He represented Susan at her 2000 and 2005 parole hearings and maintained a website dedicated to her legal representation. Charles Manson was an American criminal cult leader and musician who led the Manson family, a cult based in California, in the late 1960s. Manson succeeded to tighten his grip over his followers. He oversaw their participation in acid trips, orgies, and lectures, which outlined his vision of the coming race war he called Helter Skelter, but that will be detailed in another video about him.
Charlie Manson sent out his family, a family of killers, up here into the Hollywood Hills, believing that they could start a war between blacks and whites. First, the family went creepy crawling, as they put it, breaking into these big houses at night while the people were sleeping. And then with knives and guns, they began to murder the rich and the famous with a kind of horror and viciousness even Hollywood wasn't prepared for.
The motive of the Manson family was to attain political power in the United States. They wanted to start a race war between blacks and whites. Manson, the family, would at least rule the United States. It was never clear if they were going to rule the world, but at least the United States.
And Charles Manson himself has said, I didn't make them do anything. They did what they wanted to do. They did what they had inside them to do. It's who they were.
I never told anybody to do anything other than what they wanted to do.
And if they wanted to do murder, that was okay with you?
That was none of my business, woman. I'm a convict. I'm an outlaw. I'm a rebel. I'm not a Sunday school teacher.
Susan was portrayed in many TV series, movies, and documentaries by Nancy Wolfe in the 1976 made-for-TV film Helter Skelter, and by Margaret Murillo in that film's 2004 remake. She was played by Maureen Ellis in The Manson Family 2003, and by Angelica Scanora in Manson, My Name is Evil 2009, by Devani Penn in House of Manson 2014, by Amber Childers in the 2015 TV series Aquarius, by Sarah Paulson in American Horror Story Cult, by Marianne Rendon in Charlie Says, and by Mickey Madsen in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So basically there is no shortage of what you can watch about the case. While with the Manson cult, Susan, along with a couple of other members, committed at least 2 murders. Manson dispatched the members Susan, Mary Brunner, and Bobby Beausoleil to torture Gary Hinman in the hopes of getting his inheritance money, after someone suggested that he had just inherited a large sum of money. Hinman had sold the Manson family bad mescaline, which is a psychedelic drug that affects all the senses, altering a person's thinking, sense of time, and emotions, and the Mansons wanted payback. When Hinman refused to cooperate, insisting that he had not inherited any money, Charles arrived on the scene and slashed Hinman's face with a samurai sword. The family kept him alive. Susan and Brunner stitched up his face with dental floss and tortured him. Finally, after 3 days, Beausoleil stabbed Hinman in the chest, and then he, Susan, and Brunner took turns holding a pillow over his face until he died, hoping to cast blame on the Black Panther for the murder and incite the race war. Beausoleil wrote Political Piggy with Hinman's blood next to a paw print. The Black Panther was a revolutionary organization with an ideology for black nationalism, socialism, and armed self-defense, particularly against police brutality. It was founded in October 1966 in Oakland, California. After the murder of Gary, Susan went to commit several others. On the night of August 8, 1969, Susan participated in the murder of Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, and 3 others. She accompanied Patricia Kernwinkle, Charles Tex Watson, and Linda Kasabian to Tate and Roman Polanski's home. Kasabian remained in the car while Kernwinkle, Watson, and Susan snuck into the house. There, they gathered everyone in the living room. Susan, instructed to kill Wojciech Frykowski, managed to tie his hands, but froze before she could kill him. He got loose, and the two of them scuffled. Susan stabbed him, in what she later claimed was self-defense. Then Susan held down Sharon Tate. In grand jury testimony in 1969, she recalls saying to Tate, who pled for her life and the life of her unborn baby, "Woman, I have no mercy for you," Susan told her. Though Susan claimed she was talking to herself, she held Tate down while Watson stabbed her in the chest. However, in 1971, Atkins testified that she killed Tate herself, although she later recanted her testimony. As they left the house, Watson instructed Susan to go back inside and write something that would shock the world. Using a towel dipped in Tate's blood, Susan wrote "Pig" on the front door.
On a hot August night in 1969, part of the Manson family, Susan Atkins, Tex Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel, carried out what the prosecutor later called the most horror-filled hour of murder in American criminal history. At Sharon Tate's house over there, they butchered 5 people. Susan Atkins confessed during her trial that they kept Sharon until last to make her suffer. She was 8.5 months pregnant.
The people in the house were all brought into the living room and tied up, and I remember that Wojciech Frykowski, I believe is his name, I had tied his hands with a towel and then was instructed to kill him. And I raised the knife that I had in my hand, and I couldn't put the knife down. I couldn't bring it down. It was just as though there was a force there that held my wrist, and I couldn't move. And as he saw that I couldn't move, then he very easily undid the ties, the towel that I tied his wrist with, and he and I began to fight. And I remember I was screaming for help, and he was screaming for help, and then Tex came and helped me, and I was left to sit and watch Sharon Tate. And about that time, all I can remember seeing is people just scattering in different places and running in different places. And I was left sitting with Sharon Tate, and she was talking to me. And I remember that I had absolutely, I felt nothing. I felt absolutely nothing for her as she begged for her life and for the life of her baby.
A couple of days later, Atkins accompanied others, Watson Manson, Kernwinkle, and Leslie Van Houten, to the home of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. Susan did not go into the LaBianca house, but was instead sent with Kasabian and Stephen Grogan to the home of actor Saladin Nader. The group failed to get to Nader because Kasabian knocked on the wrong apartment door. In the meantime, the other Manson members were busy butchering the LaBianca couple and painting their signature blood words on the walls of the house. On August 16, 1969, the police raided Span Ranch in connection with auto theft. Charges were later dropped and everyone was released. Soon after their release, Manson and his followers left Span Ranch for Baker Ranch, another isolated location. However, the authorities were still suspicious of the group, raided the new location in October 1969, and arrested the group again on auto theft charges, which would be the last time many of them would be free. Just after his arrest, another member of the group implicated Susan in the Hinman murder, and she was charged with that crime. While in jail, Susan befriended 2 middle-aged career criminals, Virginia Graham and Veronica Howard, to whom she confessed her participation in the Tate LaBianca murders. For example, telling the woman that she had stabbed Tate and tasted her blood. They subsequently reported her statement to the authorities. This, combined with information from other sources, led to the conviction of Susan and others involved in the Tate LaBianca murders. The others include Van Houten, Krenwinkel, Kasabian, and Watson. Virginia Graham and Veronica Howard later received $25,000 award offered by Roman Polanski for solving the murder case. Their testimony was corroborated by extensive forensic evidence, the testimony of Linda Kasabian and the grand jury testimony of Susan herself. Susan agreed to testify for the prosecution in exchange for the state of California not seeking the death penalty against her. Susan appeared before the grand jury in 1970 and provided extensive testimony concerning the event of the nights of August 8 and 9, 1969. In the grand jury testimony, Susan described the moment she killed Sharon Tate, saying, "I was alone with that woman. She said, 'Please don't kill me.' And I told her to shut up, and I threw her down on the couch. She said, 'Please let me have my baby.' Then Tex Watson came in and he said, 'Kill her,' and I killed her. I just stabbed her and she fell and I stabbed her again. I don't know how many times. I don't know why I stabbed her. She kept begging and pleading and begging and pleading, and I got sick of listening to it, so I stabbed her." Susan also denied her earlier statement to Howard and Graham that she had tasted Tate's blood.
The district attorney says you drank Sharon Tate's blood.
I never did that.
The district attorney says that you said it was better than orgasm.
I never said that to the district attorney.
There is ongoing debate as to the exact details of killings and the accuracy of Susan's grand jury testimony. In the book Helter Skelter, the prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi, wrote that he viewed Susan's testimony as substantially truthful, with a few omissions concerning the event of the second night. However, Susan herself later gave a slightly different account of the crime. In 1976 interview, after she had became a born-again Christian, Susan claimed that she did not actually stab anyone during the Tate murder, and that Watson was responsible for the murder of Shannon Tate. In his 1978 memoir, Watson declared himself responsible for all of Tate's injuries, characterizing Susan's initial confession as exaggeration, jailhouse bragging, and a bid for attention.
They say she's become a devout Christian, and she says she wants only to serve God. Susan Atkins feels that her horrifying experience with drugs can be a lesson to those that use them or think about using them.
I believe that it was by the grace of God that my hand did not go down with that knife on Wojciech Wachowski's chest. I believe that...
Well, who did kill those people?
that night,
Yeah.
Tex.
In this room were all the survivors of those victims, of yours and the others, their families and their friends. What would you say to them?
Well, about me now is that I'm not the woman that I was in 1969. I'm a new creature in Christ. I've been completely, spiritually, mentally, and almost physically born again, though my outside is not changed all that much. The inside of me has changed. That I love them with a love that I don't think any words that I could tell them could express, but only by living a life that may help somebody else.
And the fact that you know out there people probably can't forgive you
Yes.
has no effect on you.
No. Because they're not the ones that I have to face in the end when I die. I have to face God, and it's His forgiveness that determines my peace. I don't like to talk about
Susan Atkins is now 33 years old. Says she underwent a Christian conversion 7 years ago, and says she was lying when she said she killed Sharon Tate, that co-defendant Charles Tex Watson actually did all the killing. Watson himself has testified he alone murdered all 7 people.
In prison, you said, gee, I stabbed Sharon Tate.
Yes.
I killed these people.
Yes.
And you were proud of it at the time.
Yes. I think you need to understand my need to be accepted in the prison system. I was very frightened. I was barely 20, 21. I was frightened. It was a means of defending myself, of appearing to be really tough and really strong. Because I did not kill anybody, I had, if you can understand this warped thinking, I had deep guilt feelings because I did not do what I was told to do with my peers at that point. And so I had guilt feelings, so I tried to make up for it and make myself to be really big, something really hard. I glorified crime.
All that helter-skelter business? Or...
Yeah, was all crazy, and I glorified it in my role in it.
For the early 1970s onward, Susan had told parole board that her original grand jury testimony was truthful and accurate as to what transcribed in the Tate home. However, it didn't completely match the forensic and autopsy reports. Regarding the Tate LaBianca trial, Manson, Krenwinkel, Van Houten, and Susan went on trial on June 15, 1970. Watson was later tried separately, as he was at the time in Texas fighting extradition, which is the formal process of one state surrendering an individual to another state for prosecution or punishment for crimes committed in the requesting state jurisdiction. Kasabian, who had no direct involvement in the murders, was offered and accepted legal immunity. During the sentencing phase of the trial, Susan testified that she stabbed Tate because she was sick of listening to her pleading and begging and pleading. Little credibility was given to Susan's testimony in general, as it frequently contradicted known facts. She claimed Manson told us that we were going to have to get on the stand, and claimed we had deliberately, remorselessly, and with no direction from him at all, committed all the murders ourselves. Throughout the trial, Susan and her co-defendant attempted to disrupt proceedings and were noted for both lack of remorse for their victims and lack of concern for their own fate. They sang Manson-penned songs while being led to the courtroom. All four defendants were sentenced to death on March 29, 1971. Susan was transferred to California's new women's death row in April 1971. Regarding the Heinemann trial, after the Tate LaBianca trial, Susan was convicted for the Heinemann murder. She pleaded guilty for the charge. She testified she had not known Heinemann was to be robbed or killed, although Atkins subsequently contradicted herself on this point in her 1977 autobiography. On April 23, 1971, Susan arrived on California's death row, but her death sentence was automatically commuted to life in prison the next year, following the California Supreme Court People v. Anderson decision, which invalidated all death sentences imposed in California prior to 1972. In her 1977 published autobiography, Child of Satan, Child of God, in which she recounted the time she spent with Manson and the family, her religious conversion, and her prison experiences. She also mentioned that from 1974 onward, Susan was a born-again Christian. After seeing a vision of Jesus Christ in her cell, she became active in prison programs, teaching classes, and received 2 commendations for assisting in emergency health intervention with other inmates, one of which was a suicide attempt.
You know a person by their behavior. And my behavior in this institution speaks to the change that occurred over 30 years ago. I'm not the same person that I was when I came in here.
Do you expect to be out someday?
I would like to be out someday. I hope to be out someday. And it's amazing that I still have hope. I don't know about expectations anymore.
Later, Susan was denied parole at least 12 times. During 2000 parole hearing, Sharon Tate's sister, Deborah, read a statement written by their father, which said in part, 31 years ago, I sat in a courtroom with a jury and watched with others. I saw a young woman who giggled, nickered, and shouted out insults. Even while testifying about my daughter's last breath, she laughed. My family was ripped apart. If Susan Atkins is released to rejoin her family, where is the justice?
Every night when I go to sleep, I know there's no pretending. There's no undoing. There's no wiping it out. There's no whitewashing it. It's there. It's a fact. It happened, and I was a part of it. I feel that there are 8 lives that had I not been involved, they may still be alive today. 8 worthwhile human beings who had the right to live, and they're no longer alive. And it's something that I live with every day. I'm sorry. I've spoken the truth as I've talked to you. And the truth is I never killed anybody. I lied at the grand jury. I lied at the trial and said that I killed people that I in fact did not. I live with that knowledge. I live with the fact that people think that I killed a pregnant woman, 8.5 months pregnant.
How had Charlie instructed you to behave when this was happening?
Mercilessly, coldly, and brutally terrorizing people. I wasn't instructed to show any mercy.
She begged and she begged and she begged. And Susan Atkins' reply again was, "Shut up, bitch, you're going to die."
The court transcripts show that you said, "Shut up, bitch, I'm going to kill you."
And now Susan Atkins is asking for parole. But every time she appears before the parole board, Doris Tate is there pleading that she be kept inside forever.
The first time that I saw her, I could have taken her by the neck and just broke every bone in her body, just throwing her down, you know. They have proven they cannot live in a society with other people.
I don't know that Mrs. Tate could ever forgive me. My hope is that someday she will, not as a means for me to be released, but as a means for her to find some peace.
I know the pain and the suffering that I caused Mrs. Tate.
The tears are fake. I feel that Susan Atkins is a Sarah Bernhardt on the stage.
A classy little actress.
A classy little actress, absolutely.
Did you or did you not kill Sharon Tate?
No, I did not.
I thought you told me earlier, though, that why you felt so bad is that
I was
you're
involved.
craving forgiveness for what you did.
I was involved. I was there. I participated. It's the same thing as actually taking a life by law. Maybe I could have stopped it. I didn't.
Why couldn't you speak up during the trial and say, I was there, I was part of it, but I didn't kill?
The women in the Manson family at that point in time were expected to back the men. And for some reason, I felt it necessary to take blame upon myself.
During the trials, though, you laughed at the system, you laughed at the victims.
I think that I went along with the program that was laid out.
Charlie's program.
Yeah.
Would you clear up once and for all what your account is? What actually happened?
I was instructed to go to the Tate home. And I went into the Tate home. And I saw people brutally murdered, and I was instructed to kill 2 people, and I could not do it. I couldn't do it.
On June 1, 2005, Atkins had her 17th parole hearing. She was given less than 6 months to live and subsequently requested a compassionate release from prison. Atkins' attorney, Eric P. Lampel, stated that Susan's condition had deteriorated to the point that she was paralyzed on one side, could only talk a little bit, and could not sit up in bed without assistance. The hearing was attended by various family members of the victims, including Deborah Tate and members of the Sebring family, and they requested that her parole be denied. She received a 3 years denial.
I'm not here for Susan Atkins. I'm here for Jay Sebring. The only hatred I feel is for the crimes themselves and for vermin who exploit and profit from these killings. It is devastating to hear today how a college degree or involvement in self-help groups and 12-step meetings could weigh against the value of my uncle's life, or worth the memory of my family happy and complete until Miss Atkins' murderous rampage. While Susan Atkins' behavior behind bars is commendable, it is merely normal for the typical law-abiding citizen. This is noteworthy because it is what Susan Atkins did abnormally that led to her original death sentence. So as you ponder criteria for Miss Atkins' prison record, I ask, is one of your loved one's lives worth years of NA, AA, 12-step meetings? Each of Miss Atkins' 9 victims deserve more. All of our families deserve more.
In this matter, the panel reviewed all information received from the public and all relevant information that was before us today, including that the prisoner is not suitable for parole because the inmate currently poses an unreasonable risk of danger if released from prison. The finding of unsuitability is based on weighing the consideration provided for in California Code of Regulations Title 15. This is a 3-year denial.
In April 2008, it was revealed that Susan had been hospitalized for more than a month with an undisclosed illness that was subsequently reported to be terminal brain cancer. Her left leg had been amputated. The Board of Parole hearing considered Atkins' request for compassionate release during its monthly meetings on July 15, 2008. During the 90-minute hearing, emotional pleas were made by both supporters and opponents of Susan's release. The public hearing limited speakers' comments to 5 minutes each. After the board heard the case, it retired to closed sessions for final deliberation. Due to her failing health, Susan herself did not attend the hearing. California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger opposed Atkins' release, stating, "I don't believe in compassionate release. I think that they have to serve their time. Those kinds of crimes are just so unbelievable that I am not for the compassionate release."
Please do the right thing.
It was an emotional, last-minute plea from relatives and friends of Susan Atkins. But the California Parole Board denied family of the 60-year-old Charles Manson follower a request for compassionate release. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger also recommended against her release. Atkins has been in prison for 37 years, longer than any other female in state history.
Ultimately, after final deliberation, the 11 members of the California Board of Parole hearing unanimously declined to refer Atkins' request for compassionate release to the sentencing court. The decision posted on its website meant that Atkins' request would not be forwarded to the Los Angeles Superior Court that sentenced her, which would have had the final say as to whether she would be released. On September 24, 2008, Atkins was transferred back to the Central California Women's Facility, to the facility's skilled nursing center. A website maintained by Atkins' husband claimed that she was paralyzed over 85% of her body and unable to sit up to be transferred to a wheelchair. For the final time, Atkins was denied parole on September 2, 2009.
It's ridiculous to continue to pay millions of dollars to keep her under custody when she can't sit up in bed.
Atkins died on September 24, 2009 at the Central California Women's Facility. A prison spokesperson announced to reporters that her cause of death was listed as natural causes. Her husband, James Whitehouse, subsequently released a statement saying that her last whisper word was "Amen."
Charles Manson follower Susan Atkins has died in prison. The 60s cult member died last night of brain cancer.
Susan Atkins' involvement highlighted the danger of manipulation by charismatic leaders and the destruction potential of extreme ideologies. Atkins didn't express remorse, and the Tate LaBianca murder remained a chilling example of how individuals can be led astray, leading to tragic consequences.
Who's had the most parole appearances in the room? Anybody got a shot?